Hello, guys. This is the 5Y5, your weekly chat for all things 5 yards. I am George Elek, and alongside me, at least in digital land, one day we'll be alongside each other again, is Ali Maxwell. And Ali, we are 5 yards ambassadors and proud of it as well. It's been another busy week on 5 yards up on the game. People even requesting players on Christmas Day. We can see how we're getting under people's skin here. Ali, what are the big talking points?
Well, the main talking point for me, and I would like to talk 20 minutes about the fact that someone, in fact, two people on Christmas Day, all they cared about was requesting a player to be put on the 5 yard site. And
all they want for Christmas is 5 yards.
Amazingly, one of the players requested was Rocco Frejapan. And apologies if I pronounced that wrong. He's a 17-year-old that plays for Witton Albion in the English non-league system. And it's basically everything that embodies the spirit of 5 yards, of the users, and of what we're all about, basically. And of course, the spirit of Christmas, because the analysts will now be going to work, working out the value of Rocco Frejapan. Someone also requested Kieran Dewsbury Hall. He's been on really good form for Luton, on loan from Leicester at the moment. And I guess that person is thinking it might not be out the question that Leicester want him involved from next season after a really strong showing in the Championship so far. In terms of buys and sells from the Tuesday transfer window, Morgan Gibbs-White continues to be quite a popular buy. Bit of a head scratcher for us and for the team at 5 yards, because Gibbs-White currently injured, not involved in this very impressive Swansea side, but clearly someone with a lot of upside. And there are people going on 5 yards and deciding that Morgan Gibbs-White is decent value. We had someone buy 100% of Tyreek Backinson, the customary buy of Michael Olise of Reading, and then big names like Haaland and Bruno Fernandes, Martinelli, and Bukayo Saka as well. Couple of sells on Tuesday. Aubameyang has left the building for someone. Same with Thiago Silva and Timo Werner, among others. The one that caught my eye, someone sold 1% of the youngster Moukoko at Dortmund, which seems harsh, which seems very harsh after his goal the other day.
Hype.
Just 16 years old, but maybe they wanted to free up some space for someone else, which is what I did, of course, last week, and bought in Rafinha.
Lovely goal.
So I've been pretty chuffed with that. George, we got 5 players to talk about, 5 things to talk about, starting with you.
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to what you said about Fregapan, because I've got 2 theories as to why that might have happened. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping the first one is right, that somebody in the Fregapan family just realised on Christmas Day they hadn't got Rocco a present yet. And they were like, we need to get him something awesome. Let's get him on 5 yards. So put in a request. Sadly, it wouldn't have come in time. My other theory is that someone had a lovely Christmas for Japan and it made them think of their favourite player. And that's how we ended up here. But best of luck to people who invest, who get involved with Rocco. The first player I'm going to talk about is Gabriel Martinelli.
Nice.
A player who is pretty topical at the moment because his return to the Arsenal starting lineup has coincided. I think coincided probably the key word here rather than caused an uptick in Arsenal's form, beating Chelsea and then going to the Amex on Tuesday night and beating Brighton as well. The first 2 starts he's made in the league for quite a while. And now, he's valued on 5 yards at 47 million. To give a bit of context alongside kind of the Arsenal youngsters, Bukayo Saka's up at 52 million. And I think that's interesting because, firstly, with Arsenal youngsters, there has definitely been a trend over the last 10, 15 years where they are massively overhyped. We see it consistently. Arsenal fans, and you can even see now with Saka, there seems to be a real desire from Arsenal fans that Saka to kind of promote him and to push his talents. And I am excited by him. He's a very good player. He's obviously very versatile. He's improving very quickly. I wouldn't have him anywhere near the kind of level of, for example, Phil Foden or Mason Greenwood or Jadon Sancho, who are kind of players of his age. But for me, Martinelli is the more interesting one because he is a guy who scored 10 goals in all competitions last season as an 18-year-old. 3 of those goals came in the Premier League. 3 of them came in Europe, in the Europa League. So he's a guy who, crucially for 5 yards, gets PP, somebody who scores goals. And what I mentioned earlier about the Arsenal youngsters, there's a difference now where Arsenal aren't very good at football at the moment. This isn't a very good Arsenal side. I'm not saying that Arsenal have been good over the last kind of 10 years or so, but this is probably the worst iteration we've seen. And there is a willingness and a desire from the fan base to just play the youngsters. They're an expectant fan base. We've all seen the Arsenal fan TV videos over the last couple of years, but now the willingness is to give these guys a chance. And so in the past, whilst we've seen players with big hype come into the fringes of the Arsenal team and then kind of disappear without a trace, there's just very little chance of that happening, because in my opinion now, when Saka and Martinelli are fit, they're not far off being immediate starters. Like we've seen with Lacazette and Aubameyang over the last 6-8 weeks or so, it hasn't worked. And it's only been Saka's movement further up the pitch and Martinelli coming in, which seemingly kind of changed the tide. So I think this is pretty low risk. I don't anticipate you're going to be getting involved on Martinelli at 47 million. And then in a couple of years, he's going to be starting up front for Burnley. I don't think that's going to happen here. Coupled with the fact that he seems to have that kind of innate goal scoring ability. Like we talk about all the different, in scout reports, all the different attributes, creativity, passing, finishing. His finishing would certainly be up there, 8 or 9 out of 10, but I think his 5 yards would be very high as well. That innate ability just to pick up areas of space, dangerous areas in the box and scoring goals. Ryan Sessegnon is a player that Ali, you and I covered a lot on the podcast, who you can't really put it down to anything but just it's either luck or it's amazing judgment in the box, and that has to go under 5 yards. So I'm not sitting here saying I think Martinelli's a massive buy at 47 million. But in terms of a 19-year-old and his potential ceiling and what he's doing at the moment and the general narrative around the club that he's at, I don't think there's much downside. And I'd much rather, because of the PP angle as well, which you have to think about when you're playing the game, I think Martinelli at 47 million is a far more compelling buy than Saka at 52, even if there's more fanfare around Saka, the player at the moment.
Well, at the very least, a few more weeks of Martinelli starting for Arsenal. And if he's as good as you think he is, then you know that he's going to become more and more popular on 5 yards. And therefore, when that's the case, a price hike is never too far away. Look, next up, I'm not necessarily going to focus on one player here, but we cannot ignore the fact that the transfer window opens in just 1 day's time. Not the 5 yards transfer window, which is open on Thursday, New Year's Eve, so don't miss that. But the real life transfer window, if you will, on January the 1st as well. And I mean, a couple of things to say first and foremost. I don't think anyone is expecting huge amounts of business in the January transfer window for mostly financial reasons, but it's certainly worth being aware of in 5 yards terms. We are not going to pretend to be ITK in the know about individual transfers and who's going where. That would be very valuable for this show, but that's sadly not where our strengths lie. But if you're playing 5 yards, being able to predict the pathway of a player, to predict the next transfer, essentially, the next landing spot for a player, is hugely valuable. I would say in terms of the skills you need to win on 5 yards, that's got to be right up there, because the value of a player at any given time is set by the 5 yards analysts, and it represents their estimate of a player's future performance pay from now until they stop playing. So evidently, the earning potential of a player is much higher once they move from, for example, a low PP league like the Championship or like Ligue 1 in France to one of the larger leagues and start playing in European competition. So that's what we're always looking out for. That's always worth bearing in mind. Not necessarily will this player reach the very top where he is now, but trying to predict that next move and get ahead of the analysts. And that's what this is about, really. I want to talk about Ligue 1 in the context of the transfer window, because that fits the bill there. A low PP league, Ligue 1, but a lot of talent in that league and a lot of interest from the bigger clubs in world football to buy young French talent. Now, add with the fact that many of you will know, and some of you might not, French football is in a complete financial crisis at the moment. And it's not just because of COVID-19, but on top of that, a very lucrative broadcasting deal, multi-year broadcasting deal, has been cancelled early. And it means that basically the top 40 clubs, the top 2 tiers in French football, only have about half of the broadcast money that they would have budgeted for. And what it means is, on top of the issues with match day revenue and paying sponsors and various things because of COVID-19, there's a big issue in French football in terms of finances. And, well, a lot of them have a lot of very good, young, talented players. And that will be one of the ways to sort of fill the cash holes, will be cashing in on some of these players. It means that their position of strength when it comes to negotiating for their young talent is significantly weakened. And in terms of 5 yards, we have to see this as an opportunity, even if it's been very tough to watch for French football. This has to be a scouting mission, if you will. There's so much talent in Ligue 1, and what we're trying to do is trying to identify the talents that will move to bigger clubs in high PP leagues, and crucially, that will thrive when they get there. It's not just a case of predicting the transfer, but I guess predicting the person that will get transferred and then will start performing at the new level. That is the aim of 5 yards. So in Ligue 1 terms, you look at the top, Lyon and Lille are co-leaders of Ligue 1 at Christmas, and they are packed full of exciting talent. Jonathan Bamba and Jonathan David are both popular players on 5 yards. Sven Botman, 20-year-old centre-back, has been linked with Liverpool. He's got to be worth a look. For Lyon, you've got Rayan Cherki and Hossam Aouar, who are really talented players. Aouar has been linked to PSG, among others. I'm not an expert in French football, but 5 yards Genesis is the scout to check out on 5 yards for all things French football. Tons of really interesting reports. Make sure you follow 5 yards Genesis on site. But I just want to flag up Memphis Depay. I think he's probably the most interesting individual for me on 5 yards in Ligue 1 at the moment. Because firstly, he's a big name. And I think a lot of people, when they think of Depay, will think of his stint at Manchester United, which, like I always compare it a little bit to Wilfried Zaha. A lot of hype, a lot of fanfare, didn't work out. But it's always worth remembering how young he was at that stage. He's still only 26, Depay, and he has been the talisman for Lyon, a good Lyon side for the last few years, racking up goals and assists. He's changed his position ever so slightly. He now pretty much plays through the middle. Crucially, in 5 yards terms, he's out of contract in the summer. And it's been reported that Lyon would probably take around 5 million euros for him in January, just to avoid losing him for free in the summer. You're looking at a guy who has thrived in the Champions League in the last 2 years, who's only 26, has all the talent in the world, has sometimes had his character and personality and his work rate questioned, but who I think deserves another shot at a big club. And I can only really see him going to one of the very big clubs, either in January or certainly in the summer. Barcelona have been mooted, AC Milan and Juventus, the normal sorts of teams. He's only £40 million on 5 yards, which I think for someone of his quality and position makes him a really interesting prospect. So, look, it comes back to you deciding whether you think he can perform at the very top level or whether he's better being a big fish in a small pond. Many will be put off by that stint at Manchester United, but I think his performances over the last few seasons in Europe as well as Ligue 1 suggest he's ready for another go. And the fact that I think he's going to be transferred to a big club makes him very interesting indeed in the mid to long term for me. So that's Memphis Depay and Ligue 1, just a league to scout heavily, I would suggest, over the next few weeks, guys. George, what's up next for you?
A couple of sells. Well, I'm just going to read out. It's going to be quite a quick one here because I don't think there's too much to analyse. And, if me and you carry on talking the way we do, we'll probably get to about the hour mark. But if I were to read out the list of the most expensive players up on 5 yards, okay, you've got Kylian Mbappe at 200 million. Erling Haaland at 130 million, Jadon Sancho at 115 million, Raheem Sterling at 93 million, Leroy Sané at 90 million, Ansu Fati 87 million, Trent Alexander-Arnold 87, Neymar 84, Timo Werner 84, João Felix 82, Gabriel Jesus 78 million. Now, I don't know about you, but there are two players there that stand out to me like a sore thumb. Mm-hmm. The first is Gabriel Jesus at £78 million. I understand that he's playing for Manchester City and that he's 23 years old and he has a lot of time on his side. But the goal scorer deluxe that we initially saw when he came to the Premier League has kind of gone. I mean, he's no longer looks that clinical finisher. He no longer seems to even be really the goal scoring focus of the side when he plays. I have a feeling that Manchester City will be looking to strengthen in that area in the coming windows, especially, I mean, we've known for a long time that Pep Guardiola would love to have a striker who would challenge Sergio Aguero for that kind of starting berth regularly. I think the case still remains that when Aguero's fit, he starts, unless it's maybe in less important games. So I think it's Jesus at 78, but the key one I want to really talk about here is Timo Werner. And Werner, 84 million, seems toppy to me for a few reasons. I mean, I was convinced when he came to Chelsea in the summer that he would be a good signing. I'd seen a fair bit of him playing for both Germany and playing in the Bundesliga. And his combination of kind of electric pace, of finishing ability, of goals, of everything, he just looked like the complete striker. But there are a few issues here. First of all, it is the position that he's playing for Chelsea. We've seen him play off the left-hand side before, but the fact remains that he's struggling for form. Chelsea themselves are struggling for form. And Frank Lampard seems doesn't have any interest in playing him as a striker up front on his own. So from that kind of bracket alone, we can expect the rate at which he scores goals to drop, and therefore the rate at which he's picked up PP in the past in his career to drop. And that makes him an interesting sell. We've also got the fact that Chelsea, we've been here before. Like, look at Alvaro Morata, and look even what's happened to him. I know you spoke about Morata recently on this show, Ali, but if Werner leaves Chelsea after a poor spell, and I'm not kind of signing his obituary yet by any stretch, I'm not entirely sure how attractive a proposition he really is necessarily moving on. He's priced up still at a level where we're expecting him to be an elite striker. I mean, as I said, he's in the top 10 most expensive players in the whole game. He's expected to make the most PP in the top 10 of anyone in world football. This has to be a pretty marked blip, and just a blip, in order for that to be the case. I don't think if I was holding on to Timo Werner now at 84 million, I would be pretty relieved that I'd be able to close at that price, because it's going to take a big, it's only been 6 months at Chelsea. There's definitely still a player there. Whether it's going to happen at Chelsea, I'm not sure. He just looks like a shadow of his former self. And I wouldn't want to be buying at that price.
So I'm going to talk about Ismaila Sarr now. I think it's time that we discuss Sarr. We like to talk about EFL players. And if you look on 5 yards at the most expensive EFL players, we've spoken about most of them so far, but not Sarr. And he's the second most expensive player on 5 yards from the EFL at £36 million. And the reason I want to talk about him now is to try and get ahead of the game, I suppose, to an extent, by which I mean Sarr has played okay in the Championship for the first 4 months, but nowhere near living up to the expectation of him sort of rivaling Emi Buendia as best attacking player in the division. Now, there have been plenty of mitigating circumstances. If you look at Watford as a whole, they haven't started the season in particularly good nick. They were accumulating points without playing particularly well, and it was mostly based on not conceding many goals, and going forward, they looked pretty desperate at times. Now, it's led to the sacking of Vlad Ivic, because then the results started moving in line with those poor performances. And the main thing for me here is, in the short term, is that the new manager, Xisco, we've been told by those in the know, those who watched his Dynamo Tbilisi teams, that he has always put an onus on attacking wing play and attacking specifically down the flanks and making use of quality wide players in his short career so far. And in just one game against Norwich on Boxing Day, that looked to be the way he was going with this Watford side. And it makes sense when you've got a player like Sarr, who, in terms of potential and in terms of, well, what we've seen at the very top level last season, even in relegation, should be considered one of the best players in the Championship. So he was very, very bright. He scored the winning goal. He created plenty down the right-hand side. And it just looks to me like one of Xisco's first objectives was get the most out of Sarr, not only to help the team in the short term, but also because this is a very valuable asset for Watford. And if they don't go up this season, that will be a bit of a... in financial terms, that would be someone who they could sell for a big chunk of money and start to mitigate the loss of earnings that you get when you stay in the Championship rather than the Premier League for a few years. So, look, the other reason it's interesting is they've just signed, or they've been reported to sign, a player called Zinke Nagel from Bodo Glimt, part of that amazing Bodo team that romped to the Norwegian title. And he's played most of his football as a right winger. So, probably a suggestion that they can coexist in a Watford side. I think Zinke Nagel's quite a versatile player. I'm sure that Sarr could do a job playing on the other side, even though he's one of those rare modern wingers who tends to play on the right side, if you will. The right-footed plays off the right. But Zinke Nagel's come in, and I just wonder if that might be a bit of a succession plan for Sarr. If whether Zinke Nagel will be allowed time to adapt and get used to English football and then fill in for Sarr if Sarr gets sold. I'm not expecting Sarr to go in January. I haven't seen any suggestions that the Liverpools and Manchester Uniteds that were linked to him in the summer are ready to splash out on Sarr after what's been a fairly iffy few months. By no means has he been poor, but just hasn't been lighting up the Championship in a way that you'd probably want if you're going to spend 40 million quid on him. But with Xisco in place and making Sarr hopefully the absolute number one outlet for his team, don't be surprised at all if Sarr starts catching the headlines a little bit more over the next few months, if he reminds everyone just how good he is and could potentially light up the Championship, finish strong, and be back at the top level somewhere next season, age 23, ready to shine at the very top level. Dan Evans has written Scout Report on Sarr on the site. His main skills, in Dan's eyes, a devastating mix of pace and trickery. I think we can all agree that there's a place for that in any top team. And I'm sort of, in terms of 5 yards, in terms of buying Sarr, I'm kind of stuck between wanting to get involved now in case what I've said comes to pass and looking like a genius, and maybe just holding off for the moment until I see another game or two from Xisco, until maybe we see if there's any transfer rumours in the next week or two. But I think just for you guys, just someone to think about in Championship terms. Yes, he's expensive at £36 million. How high is his ceiling and what is his likely next destination? Those are the questions you have to be asking yourself on site at the moment.
Very good case made there for Ismaila Sarr, a player that we're probably expecting not to see for too much longer in the EFL. I'm hoping the player I'm going to talk about now will be there for a little bit longer, and it's Christian Bilik of Wayne Rooney's Derby County. Ali, I know when I sent you the text saying I was going to talk about Bilik, I imagine your heart probably sank because I know that you love him and you're probably hoping that you'll be able to cover him.
Correct.
At some stage. He's a centre midfielder, a leggy, rangy centre midfielder who we first saw when he was on loan from Arsenal at Charlton Athletic when they won promotion from League One. He then was bought for, how much was it, £8 million?
I think a little more, maybe upwards of 10.
For Derby, and pretty quickly sustained a fairly serious injury, and we're just seeing him getting back into the side now. There is so much to like about Bilik in terms of what he does as that holding midfielder in terms of breaking up play, but he's also just a lovely footballer. He's a player whose passing ability, his progressing passing ability is very good. We saw that in evidence last night in Derby's 4-0 win away at Birmingham. And he's up on 5 yards at £8 million. He's just 22 years of age. My early concerns would have been, he's a young player who sustained a serious injury. Is he going to come back and be the same player? The resounding answer to that is yes. Derby County fans are incredibly excited about what they're seeing. And whilst Rooney, the manager, might grab the headlines, probably Bielik's influence in the middle of the park has been just as important. But what I would say is that the early signs of Rooney, the manager, have been incredibly impressive. And that in itself has a knock-on effect into where we can expect Bielik's career to go, at least in the short term. I think it's, we see in the scout reports on 5 yards, there's the shades of question where scouts are asked, who does this player remind you of? And I think that's quite an important one here, because often, Ali, you and I talk about players who get lots of assists or who get lots of goals, and that's important for their PP. I don't think we can expect Bilik to get many assists and many goals, even if last night tells us something different, given he got the opener from a set piece, a very scrappy goal. But that doesn't mean that they're not of use. So the two players I'd probably compare him to in the Premier League at the moment are probably Højbjerg at Spurs, another player who's very, very good defensively, but is also very comfortable on the ball, and Declan Rice at West Ham, who I think we probably can expect to move on from West Ham fairly soon in terms of the style of play. Rice and Højbjerg are priced up. Højbjerg's at 32 million, Rice is 35 million. And you might be saying, well, that's a big step up because they're playing Premier League football. There's just no doubt in my mind at all that Christian Bilik will be a Premier League footballer playing that role for a decent Premier League side in a couple of years. So if you're just looking at complete parallels, so long as he stays fit and gets to that level, it doesn't really matter what he does in terms of actual game impact, because when he's playing at that level, his price is going to go up accordingly. So even though it might look like a fairly high price for a sitting midfielder in the Championship, he's going to get there. I mean, I doubt it'll be with Derby, but I'm pretty sure more performances like this, and he's going to be, someone like West Ham. Say if Rice was to move on to Chelsea in the summer, I think someone like Bilik would be very, very high on West Ham's list of players to replace him, especially because we've seen them recruiting from the EFL recently. I think this would be a really, really smart investment and a really fun one to watch, because he's a cracking player and somebody who's going to play a lot if he can keep fit.
Yeah, absolutely love Bilik. Agree with everything you've said. That's it from us today, guys, on the 5 Yards 5. Hope you've enjoyed this latest edition of our weekly segment talking all things 5 yards. Let us know if you've got any questions. Get in touch with the 5 yards Twitter accounts if you've got any queries about the site. And just a reminder that the transfer window in 5 yards terms is open on Thursday, the 31st of December. That is New Year's Eve. Ring in the new year by boosting your squad, by tinkering, by getting involved with some new players and thinking about selling some of the ones you've got already. And then as of next week, we'll be back to the regularly scheduled transfer windows on Tuesday the 5th and Friday the 8th, Tuesdays and Fridays, back again going forward. But thank you for watching this. Have a think about what we've said. Have a think about the January transfer window. Start thinking in 5 yards terms when you're thinking about your favourite players and about young talent. And thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss one of these next week, and go well.